Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the HazMat podcast, episode number 12. And today we're going to talk all about asbestos surveys. I have my good friend and colleague here, Jacques.
How's it going?
I've just drug him in. Sorry, we're going to try something a little bit different than me just badgering onto the camera. I may as well badger him instead, and hopefully you guys will still be able to pick up some good points about asbestos surveys, which is what we're covering in this podcast. So, yeah, a big component of what we do is derived actually from asbestos surveys, and I thought it's a good idea to explain what they are. Jacques, I've written you some questions, mate.
Yeah.
Relax. Tell me what you reckon. Go from the top. What's the first question?
So, start at the simplest one. What is an asbestos survey?
Well, I'm glad that you asked. All right, so an asbestos survey is a detailed report on a property. It may be a house, it may be a building, it may be a section of land, but it's a detailed report outlining anything within that area that does contain asbestos. Similar to, have you seen a building report before? Have you ever seen one?
Yeah.
Builder's report?
A couple of them, yeah.
When, a lot of the time someone's buying a house, they might get a building report done, and it's pretty much a survey of the building, and it talks about the foundations, it talks about the cladding, the roof, the ventilation, all the things to do with the building. Asbestos survey is very similar, but it just talks about the asbestos components within that area. So, yeah, in a nutshell, an asbestos survey is a report done by a professional going through a section or a property or a building, whatever it might be, and identifying all the asbestos that's in there.
Who can do asbestos surveys? Anyone or?
Great question. If I got you to go and do an asbestos survey, could you do it?
I mean, I could, yeah. I work with the stuff every day, so
100%.
I know what to look for.
Yeah. So the answer is somebody that has experience, a good amount of experience with asbestos and where to find it, can do an asbestos survey.
So I don't necessarily need a qualification for it.
No, you don't. But in New Zealand,
license.
Yeah, there's certainly an accreditation that we get in New Zealand, and we actually get it from the UK, and it's called the British Occupational Hygiene Society, or BOHS, which is an organisation over there. We don't have our own accreditation here in New Zealand, but most surveys that I know and myself, we get accredited by the BOHS, so we do a course and an exam, but really in law, in the asbestos regulations, there is no actual qualification you must have. It does say though, or WorkSafe suggests that it should be done by a competent person, being somebody that is experienced in finding asbestos and taking samples as well.
Why would I need an asbestos survey done?
Asbestos survey is very important for a couple of different things. There's one, if you're going to knock a building down, demolition, either a house or you're knocking a building down or any structure, you should have an asbestos survey done. And the reason why, we don't want to go knocking down a property with asbestos in it, because that can put those people at risk of disturbing asbestos without meaning to. So we need a survey done if we're knocking a building down or a property. That's called an asbestos demolition survey. The other occasion may be for refurbishment. So, for example, your kitchen, you're going to renovate your kitchen, so that you're going to knock some walls down, you're going to pull up the cabinets and demolish them, and you're going to rip up the flooring. Well, you need an asbestos survey done beforehand to identify within that area if there's going to be any asbestos that you disturb, i.e. checking the vinyl flooring, maybe there's a textured ceiling in there, maybe there's some sort of cladding, asbestos cladding that you might disturb. So demolition, number one. Number two could be refurbishment. You should get one done first. The third occasion is, as a good landlord, just like with any risky material in a building or a property that you're renting out, you should have one done so you know exactly what, and you can let your tenants know what items within that building might be asbestos. I think it's a good idea for them to know if there's an accident or an emergency, you should identify asbestos within a building if you're renting it out.
I mean, what's the difference between a survey and just normal garden variety testing? Grabbing a sample of something that seems to be asbestos.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the key thing is the asbestos survey structure is very thorough, and we, in general, we're very professional surveyors, and we are able to look for areas that have asbestos that your general person that knows a little bit about the subject might miss. So, for example, you might go up into a roof cavity and pull up the insulation up in the roof and see that there's some debris from an old asbestos roof that has been pulled down 30 years ago and wasn't cleaned up. Now, a normal person looking at a property testing wouldn't really see that. Or things like pipe lagging, things like chimney flues. There's a lot of areas where asbestos can be that most people that don't have a lot of experience with it or with survey might miss. So that's why it's better to get a proper survey done.
What do they look like? Or how invasive is a survey going to be on my property?
Yes, good. Well, that's two good questions there, mate. So, look, number one, I happen to have here an asbestos survey that I did myself a few years ago now on a property in Wellington. And this is an example of what you can expect. Detailed report, address and a photo of the property on the front cover, who's doing the survey, and then essentially as you go into it, the meat and potatoes are, let's see, we talk about how we're going to do it, we talk about who should have it done and things of that nature. But when you break it down, you get into a register or some type of schedule where you have it listed. Where is it here? Excuse me. You end up with some sort of a table, and hopefully you can't actually read that specifically because it is confidential, but you end up listing down the items within the property that have asbestos in them. So we know that because we've had them sampled, we've taken the test, or with our experience, some of the things we can actually look at and just be able to tell, yes, that is asbestos, like a Super 6 roof or something like that. So either we'll sample the material if we're not sure and wait till we get a result, or we can do what they call a presumption, where we look at it and say, yes, that's asbestos, and we'll document that accordingly. So it looks like similar to a building report. Within it, we look at each item. We take photographs where it's located in the property. We have a description of what exactly it is. So, for example, we're looking at here approximately 8 square meters of cement product of an internal wall in a property. So we have details of each item, photographs of it, and then at the back we have a map, some sort of a floor plan where we actually outline where the sample was taken from and more or less the extent of it. There's no point just telling you it's asbestos without showing you how far does it go, and what condition it's in as well. So that's what it looks like.
Good. How much would a survey cost me?
Great question. So it varies. It's more or less not an exact science. I don't think it's really a fixed price item you can get these days. It really depends on how big is the area that we're surveying. A one-bedroom house that's easy to locate is going to be a lot cheaper than the survey of a 10-story building in the city. So it really depends on how long is it going to take and how many samples we're going to have tested. So, yeah, some surveys can take an hour to do. Some might take 3 days to do. So the cost will always vary depending on
The property.
how big it, yeah, exactly, where it is, how big the property is, and also, how old it is. If it's a property that's built right in that heyday of asbestos, then you're going to expect that there's going to be a lot more samples needed than a property that was built in the early 90s, say. You might not need hardly any samples, if any.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it from me.
Okay.
Questions I've got. Yeah.
Awesome.
You've just answered the last question. How long does it take?
We'll talk about just quickly about doing a survey. Like, what does it really look like? So we looked at the report at the end. But so a survey in general is an initial inquiry on the property. So we find out the age of the property, the location, and things of that nature, the accessibility. Then after that, we will book in with our client a suitable time to go and do it. And then there's two parts.
Don't need to be present.
No, they don't need to be present at all. In fact, it's probably better if they're not present while you're taking samples. But so we figure out a rough estimate of how much it's going to cost and what we're going to need to do. Then we book in the time to do it. Then we go in and do the physical survey itself. So we crawl in the roof space. We go in all the bedrooms and all the rooms. We open up flooring to look at the flooring. We go into the subfloor. We may go into the backyard and look at sheds and things out the back if that's part of the survey. So we do the physical work where everywhere we find an item, we'll document that for the report, and we may take a sample as well. So once we've finished the physical side of it, we've combed through the property. We may have, say, 10 samples on board. We've taken photographs of each of those areas. We've looked at the floor plan, so we've made that map ready to print. And then we'll submit all of those to a lab. And the lab will obviously ascertain yes or no, these have asbestos in them or not. Once we have those answers from the lab, we can then start putting the paperwork together and compiling the report. We've taken 10 samples and we found, as an example, 6 of them are positive and 4 of them were negative. And so we can just map out the areas that are positive and put that in the report. And some surveyors will also put in all the things they checked that were negative as well. You don't have to do that because the idea is to identify the asbestos. But you sometimes it looks more thorough, and it is more thorough if you print out the areas you thought might be and actually publish them in the report as being not asbestos, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So as a property owner or homeowner myself, if I get a survey done, am I legally required to retain the survey itself for any future tenants, or if I ever sell the place? Is it a have to, or that makes you a nice person?
That is a great question. So, looking at the legislation, at least in New Zealand, and normally we mirror off the UK and Australia and even probably the US. The reason why we have surveys done from an illegal sense is it's not so much a duty to do a survey, but the legal requirement that we have in New Zealand is if you're going to demolish a building or renovate a building, you have a duty to identify asbestos within that building. So that's the legal part. So it doesn't say you have to have a surveyor do a survey. Or it really doesn't mention in our legislation, doesn't mention much about surveys at all. But what it's come from is the law says you must identify asbestos within a structure before you demolish it. And so how do we do that? We do that by doing an asbestos survey. So, for example, if you sell your property, yes, you should probably retain that record because, again, that duty to identify there's no time limit on it at this stage. It's permanent, so you should always be able to identify it. If you, for example, had a survey done, you sold the property and the record was lost or you didn't pass it on for whatever reason, then that person still has a legal duty to identify asbestos within the structure. So therefore, that means they need to go and get a survey done.
Or redone, basically.
Redone. But yeah, the point is they might never have known that one was done.
So there's no public record or like cloud record of all the surveys that have been done.
No, no, there's not.
Connects it to the address.
That's right. There's no WorkSafe or there's no apparatus that we have that I'm aware of that has a central kind of database of areas that have been surveyed or not. It's legally under each person themselves. It's a law that, before you demolish your building or refurbish it, you should have all the asbestos identified. I think when we talk about tenants and being a good landlord and identifying it in a building or a workplace, that's more under the general health and safety obligation to ensure your workplace is safe or your tenancy is safe for people. So that's the legal obligation there. If you're not planning to demolish or refurbish, you still need to know in a building what is asbestos so you can keep your tenants or workers safe. Yeah.
That's pretty much it from my side.
Cool.
Nice little questions.
That's good. All right. Well, I think we've covered it off reasonably well. We will do a future episode actually more on the technical side of surveys. We talk about risk assessments and material assessments and things like that. But that should be a good introduction to surveys and why you need them and what they are and who should have them. So thank you for joining us on episode 12. We look forward to coming back next week with another episode. Me and my new co-host.
Yeah, I know that.
And please like and subscribe to this channel. It's very helpful. And we welcome your comments. Thank you very much. See you next week. Bye.